All right, we can get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the very first session of the research seminar series of the year. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Maria, and I am a program assistant with the BC Brain Wellness Program, and I am very excited to be hosting today's session. We have two amazing guest speakers today, Nicole and Alexandra, who will be talking about decisions on driving, particularly with multiple sclerosis and Parkinson's disease, and all about navigating driving retirement. So for those of you who might be joining us for the first time today for a research seminar series, this is a virtual series happening on the third Wednesday of each month, where we are featuring some of the amazing researchers at UBC, like today's special guests, who are doing research on brain wellness. So before we dive into today's session, I would first like to acknowledge that the BC Brain Wellness Program at the Javid Moafagian Center for Brain Health is situated on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Hunkaminam-speaking Musqueam peoples. I am also joining from Vancouver, and I would like to encourage you all to take a moment to acknowledge and give thanks to the land that we are privileged to work, learn, and play on. Additionally, I would also just like to point out a few housekeeping items to keep in mind. If you have any questions or thoughts throughout the session, please feel free to pop them in the chat box, and we will get around to them during our Q&A session after the presentation. Please note that we will be recording today's session and uploading it to the BC Brain Wellness Program YouTube channel. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our wonderful speakers, Nicole and Alexandra. Nicole Carlson is a second-year occupational therapy student at the University of British Columbia. She completed her undergraduate degree in community rehabilitation and disability studies at the University of Calgary. Nicole has worked in a variety of settings, including inpatient rehabilitation and private practice, supporting people with neurological conditions to participate in valuable and meaningful activities. She looks forward to seeing how the development of a driving retirement workbook can better support people with neurological conditions in their decisions around driving. Alexandra Swan is a second-year occupational therapy student at the University of British Columbia. She is passionate about helping people navigate the challenging aspects of their life and supporting them in reaching their goals. After obtaining her undergraduate degree from UBC, she spent time working with neurodiverse youth in the interior before moving back to Vancouver to pursue occupational therapy. She is excited to be developing a workbook that can help support people through the journey of retiring for driving. I will now pass it on to Nicole and Alexandra. The floor is all yours.
Thank you, Maria, for the lovely introduction. I would like to start by providing a brief overview of our research team and why we are involved in this study. The team working on this project is made up of 3 occupational therapists and 2 occupational therapy students. Together, we bring various levels of expertise and experience. As a part of our program, Nicole and I are given the opportunity to participate in research. We chose this topic area as we understand the importance of driving and the need for driving-related supports for people. And we're really excited and interested to work with our team on developing a resource for people in this area. As occupational therapists, we are passionate about working with people to help them do things they want and need to do in their lives. And we know that driving is an occupation that plays a large part in people's lives, and thus OT has a role in supporting people in their driving needs. This can mean supporting people in adapting their driving, keeping people remaining engaged in occupations after people slow down or stop driving, or other things depending on a person's needs. Due to occupational therapy's important role in supporting decisions about driving, this led to the idea of developing a resource for people who have neurological conditions to make decisions about driving. Now I will move into discussing some background information about what led to the development of this project. So for the background, first and foremost, people drive for many reasons, and there are many drivers out there. Approximately 3.6 million people in BC have driver's licenses. And driving can mean different things to people, and everyone will put different values on driving. People drive for many reasons, including work, school, leisure, seeing family and friends, going to appointments, or shopping, among many other things. I want you all to take a moment and think about all the reasons you may have to drive. So now you can see that this means that driving plays a large role in many people's lives, whether we're really aware of it or not. But what happens when our ability to drive changes? We all know the risks that are involved with driving, and there are many cognitive and physical skills required to be a safe driver. Sometimes our bodies are not up to the task of driving, and this can be due to many different reasons. Health conditions, such as Parkinson's disease or multiple sclerosis, can result in changes that can affect one's driving ability, including cognitive and physical symptoms. Some common cognitive symptoms we see are fatigue, memory changes, thinking speed, and this can affect one's ability to remember routes and attend to the road or be aware of hazards on the road. Some common physical changes we see are pain, muscle weakness, spasticity, vision changes, and slow movements. And this can affect one's ability to respond to those hazards, control the pedals and steering wheel, and enter and exit the vehicle safely. And although you may be experiencing some of these symptoms, it does not mean that you have to give up driving entirely. But what it does mean is that you need to start being aware of the effect these symptoms have on your driving and where to find resources to ensure that you are making educated decisions regarding driving and that you continue to be safe on the road. It is also important to note that these changes are not only experienced by people with multiple sclerosis or Parkinson's disease, and that all of us must be aware of how our body can affect our driving and know where to find information to support our decisions around driving. But people are often left with questions about driving. It can be a complicated and confusing time when people start to notice changes in their ability to drive. Often people do not know where to find information, and they are left with many questions, including, is it safe to continue to drive? How am I able to live the life I want if I stop driving? What are the rules of driving with a neurological condition? Among many other questions and concerns. We know that people drive for many different reasons, and that driving plays different roles in each of our lives. And additionally, each person will have a different combination of symptoms that may affect their driving. This complexity can make it hard for people to find information that's related specifically to them and their situation. And this can lead to a very confusing process for people, and people are faced with challenges to make educated decisions around their driving. We know that there are many questions that people have regarding driving after being diagnosed with a neurological condition. And this further showed us that people need support in navigating a situation. So how can we help with this? Putting this all together, our team determined the best way to help people with this issue is to develop a resource that people can use to make decisions about driving. We know that people drive for many reasons, and that as our bodies change, our ability to safely drive changes as well. We also know that this is a very confusing process for people, and there's currently not much support to help people navigate this. Our goal for this resource is giving people the information they need to make decisions around driving. We want to ensure that people are well prepared to be safe while they continue driving and continue to remain engaged in the things that they want or need to do in their lives when they eventually stop driving. The purpose is to provide the information that allows people to be informed about what is all involved with driving when you have a neurological condition and make a decision and a plan to move forward. But before we went into our study, we read the literature to see what they had to say about driving with a neurological condition. We found that having a disease such as Parkinson's or multiple sclerosis can in fact change someone's ability to drive, but does not the same for every person with this condition, which leads to further confusion regarding decision making. We also learned that each individual is different and everyone's journey towards driving retirement is different. Another key point and a key takeaway that we had is that people are often left unsupported on their own when it comes to making decisions about a neurological condition, and healthcare providers do not have a comprehensive resource to provide their clients, especially one that is specific to these conditions and specific to British Columbia. However, the main takeaway is that when people do get support in making these decisions, there is a reduction in some of the possible negative consequences that can be related to driving retirement, including negative self-esteem, anger, or possible reduction in engagement in occupations. So it's really exciting that these negative consequences can be reduced by having support, and that making decisions about driving doesn't have to be a negative experience. We hope to be able to support people along their driving journey, whatever that may look like for them. So this research really highlighted the importance of developing a resource that will help support people in making decisions about driving. Next, we looked into what's happening already and what's missing. There are a few programs already out there, including Car Free Me, which is an Australian-based program, Traveling a New Road, which is based out of Ontario, and Down the Road, which is based out of Victoria here in BC. And while these resources are great, they tended to be focused on the older adults or those with memory challenges. And additionally, they are not specific to British Columbia. So through all of our extensive research, we found that there are no resources that focus on people with Parkinson's disease or multiple sclerosis, and that no resource was specific to British Columbia. And due to the complex and unique presentation of these conditions and the uniqueness of driving within different regions and provinces, we knew that a specific program was needed to be developed to fill this gap. So where did we start? Last year, our colleagues completed a formal assessment of this need to ensure that this is something that people in British Columbia would use and needed. They conducted surveys and then analyzed the data. And this was done to get a sense of what people in British Columbia who have Parkinson's disease or multiple sclerosis want and need out of a driving resource. They found that people with neurological conditions did in fact notice a difference in their ability to drive, and that many people currently had no plan for driving retirement. Additionally, they found that over half the people surveyed were not familiar with driving self-management strategies, and people did not have a clear understanding of where to access information on driving with a neurological condition. Importantly, they found that many people did want to learn more about a driving resource to support decisions, and that many of those retired from driving would have wanted this resource when they were still driving. This further indicated a need for a resource specifically designed for this population. And this led to our study. So putting all of that together, this study by our colleagues told us that people in BC do want a resource to support their decisions around driving with a neurological condition, and that there are other programs around the world, and our knowledge of the importance of driving with a neurological condition can influence how neurological conditions can influence driving led to the current study and workbook. And we really hope that this workbook will be able to provide users with the knowledge they require to make educated decisions for themselves and reduce the amount of questions and confusion people face when driving with a neurological condition. So before we get into the talking about the actual study, we'll just take a quick minute break so everyone can kind of stand up and have a stretch, take a glass of water, whatever you need, and then we'll dive into talking about what our actual study entails.
We'll give everyone 3 minutes, so if you could come back at 12:18, that would be great. All right, so I hope everyone was able to take a quick break, whether that was to get some water or stretch. Next, we are going to dive into our study specifically and provide a little bit more information on our workbook. So our study was built on 3 foundations, as you can see here: reviewing the literature, consulting with experts in the field, and utilizing results from the previous study that Alexandra mentioned earlier. So reviewing the literature meant that we did an exhaustive review of previously published works on this topic. And this was how we gained a deeper understanding of the impact that neurological conditions have on driving, and the importance of providing education and resources to people with neurological conditions so that they can make informed decisions about their driving. We also consulted with other members of the research team who are experts in the field of driver rehab and neurological conditions. So most notably, we consulted with Dr. Susan Forwell, who is a professor and department head of occupational science and occupational therapy at UBC. She has done extensive research on chronic neurological conditions and their impact on chosen occupations. We also consulted with Denise Kendrick, who is a clinical instructor, researcher, and occupational therapist. And Denise has spent the past 7 years developing a student-enhanced OT program in the UBC MS clinic. And finally, we consulted with Lisa Kristalovic, who is an occupational therapist who specializes in driver rehabilitation. She's been doing it for the last 20 years, and she supports people maintain their ability to drive, return to driving, or even begin driving. And then the third piece of our foundation was utilizing the findings from the previous UBC study. So as Alexandra mentioned, these researchers conducted what's called a needs assessment to gain a better understanding of what people with neurological conditions felt they needed to support their decisions on driving. And we found the findings from this research to just be so valuable because we were hearing directly from those who would potentially use this resource what they would like to see. So by using these findings, we were able to learn from those with lived experience and then incorporate it into our workbook. So the final product was this workbook. Here you can see the cover of the workbook titled Decisions on Driving. And this workbook consists of 5 sections with 2 to 3 chapters in each section. This workbook is interactive, it's easy to read, it leaves lots of room for participants to write out their thoughts, feelings, questions for their healthcare providers. There's also a section in the end that contains a driving self-assessment. There's a fillable letter of commitment to family and friends that you can fill out. There's also space in the back of the book to organize any resources that you've collected along the way as you work through the workbook. So in the following slides, we're going to give you a preview and a bit of an overview of what each section consists of. So section 1 is titled Driving with a Neurodegenerative Disease and consists of 3 chapters. This section provides information on who can support you as you navigate driving with a neurological condition. So this includes your healthcare team, your doctors, your therapists, but also looking at Road Safety BC, ICBC, and your family and your friends. Next, this section provides information on Parkinson's disease and MS and explores how the symptoms of these neurological conditions can impact your ability to drive. And as you see in the photo on the right, this is just a screenshot of one of the pages of this workbook. And you can see that there's diagrams, there's spaces to reflect on how your diagnosis has impacted your decisions on driving. It leaves space for you to write out questions, concerns, thoughts. So it's laid out really nicely. One of the big things that we learned in the needs assessment was that people didn't want a textbook that was just dense and full of text, but they wanted pictures and space and room and something that was easy to read. So that was something that we really tried to incorporate into this workbook. Finally, this section describes how operating and controlling a motor vehicle is actually quite a complex task, and it's made up of multiple steps consisting of physical, mental, emotional components for it to be done safely and efficiently. So it will address concerns like back pain, spasticity, changes in memory, attention, vision, all of those sorts of things. So that is section 1. Next, we have section 2, and it is titled Strategies to Maintain Driving and consists of 3 chapters as well. First, this looks at what you can do to keep your body in the best shape to drive and how to effectively manage fatigue. Then it introduces what's called a best fit checklist, where you can assess your body position and how this may be impacting your ability to drive safely. This section also looks at vehicle modifications, how to get help from a driving specialist, and ways that you can change your driving so that you can increase your safety on the road and also maintain your current driving abilities. Next, we have section 3, and this is titled Driving Retirement and My Life and consists of 3 chapters. This section first looks at all the reasons why someone may drive, and it provides space for you to reflect on why driving is important in your life, and it helps you identify tasks and activities that you complete that require transportation. This section also addresses feelings around driving and driving retirement. It's a really difficult conversation to have, and there's lots of feelings of potentially stress, anxiety, confusion. So this section really delves into those complex feelings and emotions. This section also discusses what we call barriers, or in the workbook, we call them roadblocks that may be influencing one's decisions about their driving. So situational barriers, environmental, person-related, we explore all of those different roadblocks. And then finally, this section looks at what the benefits are for someone who begins to drive less or completely retires altogether from driving. Next, we have section 4, and section 4 is titled Maintaining My Activities After I Stop Driving, and consists of 3 chapters. And this section begins by looking at alternative transportation options for those who are considering driving less or altogether. It looks at strategies of incorporating family and friends into your support system, such as developing a schedule or utilizing multiple forms of transportation. This section is also the section that talks about power mobility devices to help people get around their communities. So looking at scooters, power wheelchairs, and power assisted wheelchairs. And finally, we have section 5, which is titled Action Plan. And this consists of 2 chapters. So the first section provides information on navigating the system. It can seem very confusing and complex, so it walks through the process of how to inform Road Safety BC, of your change in medical status upon diagnosis, and just kind of walks through what that process will look like. And this section provides clear guidelines and a self-assessment tool that you can use in making decisions about your driving when you do feel that the time is right. This is the section that I mentioned earlier that has a commitment letter that you can fill out for family and friends, and that would also provide guidelines for when you want to finally stop driving. And then I mentioned this earlier as well, but there is a resource section in the back where you can record information that you've collected over the course of the workbook. So like transportation options, developing schedules, there's lots of space in the back to write things out. So overall, we have developed 5 objectives for this workbook that we hope and believe that readers will be able to achieve following its completion. And they are being able to identify how the symptoms of your neurological condition impact your ability to drive, to be able to identify driving maintenance strategies that may prolong your driving abilities, to be able to identify situational, environmental, and person-related barriers that impact your decisions around driving, to learn about alternative transportation options, and finally, to develop a driving retirement action plan. So I know that was a lot of information. It is a very comprehensive workbook. We've spent, oh my goodness, I think maybe 7 or 8 months developing it. So for me to just summarize it in 10 minutes, I'm sure probably felt like a lot. But what we want to do next is kind of walk you through the steps of, now we've developed this workbook. What are we going to do now with it? So the workbook is done. What's next? So we recently received ethical approval from UBC, and we're now able to recruit participants with Parkinson's and MS to review this workbook for us and provide feedback. So this feedback from people with lived experience will be instrumental in making the necessary changes and improvements to this workbook so that it can one day be used as a resource for people across the province. So we hope to gain feedback and participant perspectives both through written surveys and focus groups. And having focus groups will just allow participants to elaborate and share further than they could with a survey. And so once this data has been collected, it will be analyzed by the research team, and improvements will be made based on this feedback. And then we plan to begin phase 2, which will be further developing this program, not just from a workbook, but into a formalized program. And this will take place fall of 2022 into early spring of 2023. So what will participants do? So as a participant in the study, you will first complete an initial survey where you can choose to either receive this workbook as a PDF version, so just emailed to you, or a hard copy of the workbook where we would physically mail it to you. And once you've received this workbook, you will have the opportunity to read and work through the book. And then when you've finished, you can provide feedback via a second questionnaire. As I mentioned, there's an additional option to participate in a focus group as well. So this would just give you the opportunity to provide like more detailed information and feedback to the research team. And participants will be compensated for their time. You would receive a gift card of $20 for completing the survey, and then an additional $20 for participating in the focus group. So what will we do with the data? So the information that you provide us will be used to make changes and improvements to this workbook. So your opinions, your ideas, your thoughts will help us improve this resource so that it can support others in the future that also have neurodegenerative conditions, and help us eventually develop it not only from a workbook, but eventually into an actual program. So if you are interested in participating, you can participate in this study if you are 19 years or older, have a confirmed diagnosis of Parkinson's or MS, and are a current or retired driver. So meaning that you have driven at some point in your life. You don't have to be driving right now, or you could be driving right now, but that you have been someone who has experienced driving. So if you or someone you know would be interested in participating, you can either follow this link to the survey, which I'm going to post in the chat box right now. Once I figure out how to do that, here we go. Or you can scan the QR code. And the QR code is just like what we have right now with COVID, where when you go to a restaurant and you have to pull up the menu, you just take your phone and you can hold it over the screen right now with your camera and the link should pop up. But if that's a little bit too confusing, you can also just follow the link in the chat. So this link that will come up is just an initial questionnaire that will ask you to confirm if you're eligible. So that will be confirming your age, that you have a diagnosis, and that you've been a driver at some point in your life. So yes or no. Then it will ask you for your name and your email, and then how you would like to receive the workbook. So if you just provide your email, then we're going to send you a PDF version. And if you want a hard copy, then we will need your address. So we will have the link in the chat, and then when we have question period later, we can bring this slide back up so that if anyone wants to go ahead and scan the screen, that they can do that as well. So to summarize everything that Alexandra and I have talked about today, we know that people with neurological conditions face changes in their abilities to drive. And the research tells us that outcomes improve when people are supported in their decisions around driving. So we developed a workbook to support people with neurological conditions so that they can make informed decisions about their driving. And we're here seeking feedback on this workbook by people with lived experience so that we can improve and develop this resource moving forward. So if you are interested in participating in this study, you can fill out that initial questionnaire. You can also email us. We will be sure to leave our emails. And you can continue to monitor the BC Brain Wellness website, as I believe we will be posting information and flyers on the website as well. So this concludes our presentation, and we will now open it up to questions.
Thank you so much, Nicole and Alexandra, for your wonderful presentation on decisions around driving. The Decisions on Driving workbook sounds very exciting, and I'm sure it will help British Columbians navigating driving retirement and answering so many other questions. So we will now proceed to the question and answer session. If anyone has any questions or even any thoughts that you would like to share in the chat, please feel free to enter them in the chat box and we will get around to them. One question that I received internally here is, what is the time commitment for participating in the study?
I can go ahead and answer that one. So it will be up to you when you receive the workbook, how much time you want to put in reviewing the workbook. The beauty of the workbook is you could read through it in just a couple of hours, but based on the time that we've spent with it, sometimes it's actually nice to kind of take a couple of days and work through and process it. So it is really up to you. If you are someone who is interested in participating in the focus group, I believe will be, did we say an hour and a half, Alexandra? An hour and a half for the additional focus group.
Wonderful. And we do have an additional question in the chat. It is, can we email Nicole to get a PDF version of the workbook?
Yes, absolutely. So if you can just complete the survey that I have attached in the into the chat box, and we can actually, maybe we'll move the slides over to the QR code if you would prefer to just scan your phone instead. So once you fill that out, we will have your information, because that's where you'll put your email in, and that is how we will send you the workbook.
Great, thank you for clarifying that. And another question here is, would the focus group be a Zoom meeting?
Yes, that's right. It will be Zoom.
Okay, great. If there are any other questions, again, please do feel free to enter them in the chat. And Cheyenne has once again entered the link to receive the workbook in the chat. Another question here is, could you tell us a little more about your thoughts on making this into a program versus just a resource booklet?
Sure, I can start, and then Alexandra can add in. When we initially went through the data from the study before us, one of the big things that participants wanted in a program was the community and having peer support and being able to work through these decisions and this information with other people that had similar experiences. So unfortunately, with a workbook, if it's just a workbook, it's something that you're typically working through just by yourself, maybe with a family or a friend. But by creating it as a program, then you can actually have other people involved as well. I don't know if you want to add to that, Alexandra.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty comprehensive explanation of what the program would entail. As of yet, we haven't started that. That's going to be the next iteration of this, hopefully next year.
Wonderful. Another question here is, once the workbook is ready for publication, how will it be made available?
Yeah, that's a great question. We haven't hammered out all the details of that yet. Likely it would probably be through your healthcare team, access through your healthcare team. But that is definitely something that we can chat about in the focus group, or you can put on the surveys if you have any ideas of how you would like to receive this book, or what would be the best option for accessibility for everybody as well.
Another question we have here is, do you have any sections on times of the day when you should not be driving in the workbook?
We do have some information on strategies that you can use to manage your driving and your symptoms. And some of those strategies are related to times a day. We don't specify specific times a day just because everybody is different and everyone's symptoms will be different, but we do give those resources to help you figure out when's the best for you to drive and that sort of thing.
Great, thank you for answering these questions.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thanks.
Any more? Unless I missed any, I will just be waiting for another minute or so to see if any more questions come into the chat. And another question is the workbook useful for people with other neurological issues than Parkinson's and MS?
As of now, the workbook is specifically developed for Parkinson's and MS, and the information is specifically tailored for those people. That being said, some of the information does overlap with other neurological conditions, and some of the strategies and the symptoms would be the same. We would probably recommend, if you have another condition, to speak directly with your healthcare team and work with them on coming up with some strategies. And hopefully in the future, we'll be able to develop more resources and have it accessible to everybody as well.
Hi, Maria. I was just wondering if it might be good for Nicole to share her phone number and email address as well. I just posted it into the chat, but for people who might be struggling to click on the link or the QR code, you could also contact Nicole directly so that she can send you a link, and that might be a bit easier. So maybe Nicole, I'll just get you to share that as well. It is in the chat, but maybe if you can share it verbally, people can write it down if they're struggling with the link at all.
Yes, absolutely. So my phone number is 403-681-8706. So I'll just say that one more time. And yes, it is an Alberta area code. I used to live there. 403-681-8706. And my email is Carlson with 2 N's. So CARLSONN. So that's CARLSONN at student.ubc.ca. So Carlson at student.ubc.ca. So feel free to send me an email or give me a phone call if you are interested.
Thank you for sharing all of this information. Again, it is also posted in the chat box, so yes, so you can also access it there as well. Another question here is, what about changing road conditions?
We do talk a little bit about changing road conditions and how to navigate that in the workbook as well.
That's wonderful. And thank you, Nicole, for also posting your contact information in the chat.
No problem. I wasn't sure if it got lost in the messages.
Right, exactly. I can also post the sign up link once more just to make sure it's there. And we can wait another minute or so to see if there are any more questions. Please do feel free to send them in the chat. Other than that, lots of wonderful thank yous to Nicole and Alexandra.
Yeah, you're welcome. We're really excited about this project and providing a resource that'll be able to support you all.
We are so excited to get feedback. That is what we want. You are the experts in your condition, and we are so excited to learn from you.
Totally.
Wonderful. Well, if there are no more questions, then that wraps up today's research seminar series. Thank you so much, Nicole and Alexandra, for your wonderful presentation on decisions around driving. And thank you to everyone for joining the session and for listening. And I'm sure that we all learned a lot about decisions around driving, particularly with MS and Parkinson's disease. So a huge thank you to our speakers and to everyone for joining. But other than that, our next session is happening next month in February, on February 16th, on lifestyle interventions and brain wellness. And we hope to see you there. Otherwise, thank you everyone for joining, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your afternoon.